Now that you have a fair idea about the type of biogeographical realms we have and the different schemes, you understand the idea called biogeographical regionalization based on shared evolutionary history and characteristics of plants and animals. And five schemes is what I had stressed on. One was a scheme given by Sclater, Wallace, some modification by Smith. These three are the zoogeographical regions. And we have two schemes on the phytogeographical regions about the plants. One was the English scheme, another being Tatyajan's scheme. Tatyajan's scheme is the more modern, the more popular, and most of the books follow Tatyajan's scheme. Without them mentioning it, the one you have in Savindra Singh is Tatyajan's scheme of phytogeographical zones. So you understand the concept here. Now, I'll give you a small schematic to help you understand and write on what are the life form variations and detailing of each of the regions. So we come back on the screen again. This is the basic scheme we have of the regionalization. We have the Nearctic region, which is essentially North America, the Palearctic region, which is Eurasia, the Neotropical is South America, Ethiopian rim is African rim, the Oriental is the Eastern tropical part, the Australian, and Nearctic, Palearctic together referred to as the Holoarctic. The Neotropical, Ethiopian and Oriental, okay, Southern and the tropical parts. This is the holotropical. Australian is separate. This is Australian. Now, this scheme applies to animals. We also call this as the zoogeographical realms. And this was the scheme given by Wallace. So you could pause the video for some time and maybe even draw this map. This is the Wallace map. Now, before you develop writing on this, the couple of facts that we have to know, or maybe call them as concepts and facts about distribution of animals. Now, the facts are, number one, that the southern Gondwana was one continent. So there is a lot of similarity between the South American and Ethiopian. So consequence of this is South American and Ethiopian have lot of similarities. That's one concept. The second concept is Australia was part of Gondwana, but it separated out, one of the earliest ones to separate out. It separated out earliest, approximately early to late Cretaceous. It had separated out. So what happened was Australia had kind of an isolation. So even if South America, Africa, and Australia were once part of the Gondwana land, we do find similarities between South America and Ethiopia, but Australia stands out. Why? Because Australia broke off from Gondwana the earliest, as early as early Cretaceous, so almost good about 60 to 65 million years, this has been separate. So the evolution in Australia has been in a different direction compared to the others. The third important fact or concept we have to remember is there's a lot of similarity between Nearctic and Palearctic. Why? Because, of course, one, of course, is the climate. The climate is very comparable. They both have taiga regions, both have tundra regions. But more important is North America and Eurasia were linked across the Bering Strait. If you remember, this is the Bering Strait here. So this is North American continent. This is Siberia and Russia here. So the Bering Strait during the ice ages and before that, this was connected. So a lot of life forms from Eurasia have come into North America. Otherwise, originally, North America did not have horses. North America did not have pigs. Okay, but a lot of animals from Eurasia have crossed over from the land bridge. So there is a role of continental drift here. So the concepts I'm discussing are the concepts related to how continental drift has impacted distribution of plants and animals. I'm discussing animals as of now. So Nearctic and Palearctic have a lot of similarities. And climate is one, but more important is the bridge, the land bridge which existed. The more important reason is the land, the bridge that existed. And the fourth important concept is that as of now, Neotropical and Neoarctic, South America and North America are connected. South America and North America are connected, but it was not always so, not in the past. The Panama, the Isthmus of Panama, this narrow belt that you have here, this is the Isthmus of Panama. This Isthmus of Panama was formed much later, during the Pleistocene and later. So the land bridge, the Isthmus of Panama, the narrow land bridge, was formed later. It was formed later. And therefore, the similarity between South America and North America is not much. Although some animals did cross over and some species did cross over, the similarity has not been much. So this is the basis of a lot of concepts you talk in the distribution of plants and animals, in particular the animals. Now this is what we can sum up if I look at the next page. We're talking about concepts and facts of distribution, I said. So I'm summing up here. One I said is South America, which is neotropical, lot of similarity with African, also called as Ethiopian. Australia remains unique. In fact, bulk of the life forms of Australia are herbivores. You don't have large carnivores here. The bulk of them are herbivores. They are marsupials. Not too many of placentals. Okay, the only placentals you can worth mentioning here, originally found, are bats and rodents or rats. Rodents, otherwise there are no large carnivorous life forms here. Third, I said the Nearctic, which is North America, is very similar to Eurasia because of the land bridge. And fourth, South America and North America were joined recently. By the way, it's reminded here, whenever I'm teaching online, I expect you to have your notes and keep jotting as I speak. Please do not see this as a webinar presentation. And don't see this as a small conversation for sake of listening. You must make your notes. Until you make your notes, you not remember most of these concepts. Okay, so these are the very important 4 points, and all these 4 points are about how continental drift impacted the distribution of animals. distribution of animals. Now, to sum this up, we can look up this small summary that I have. Now look at the summary. So what we have done is, we have a tabular form. For each region, we have mentioned the name, location. Palearctic, you understand, is a old world, okay, north of Tropic of Cancer, Eurasia, Europe, North Africa, excluding Arabian Peninsula. Conditions is a very big range of conditions, grasslands, deserts, the plateaus, wet forests. To this, you can also add, there are uh, tundra conditions also. So your climate is also tundra and temperate. So fauna life forms is a very big range of life forms, a big range. And the big range pick up randomly. Some fishes, like carps is a fish, salamander is one type of life form, frogs and toads, amphibians. We have birds, something random, and flora, Nearctic, North America, grasslands, deserts, snow, tropical dense forests, temperate tundra. And very important here is, okay, that they're rich in reptiles, rich in reptiles. And a very important point I mentioned was that horses and pigs were not originally found here. So these have come from across, okay, the Palearctic region. So a lot of life forms from Palearctic have moved into this, okay, because of the land bridge. Ethiopian rim, okay, this is very similar to, I said, the parts of neotropical. There is a lot of similarity here. Mention location where it is. Big rivers, mountain, grassland, deserts, tropical type of climate. Rich in mammals, again, in particular, large mammals. Large mammals. It does not have too many of big rivers, does not have too much of large lakes. So amphibians have not developed well here. Whereas compared neotropical, it's also called as neogene. Neogene term was used, okay, by some of the scholars, not all of them. So Sclater had used this term neogene, and even Schmidt had used the term neogene for neotropical. But for Sclater, neogene included even North America, not for Smith. Look up the previous video where I've discussed this. Okay, and conditions. Now this is the continent of birds. This is important. Lot of birds, ducks, parrots, and colorful birds here. Dense rainforest, forest, okay, plus a range of, okay, frogs and toads and the rest. Australia is unique. Australia is unique. It has, okay, deserts, grasslands. The main type of, okay, flora in Australia is eucalyptus. Eucalyptus, almost 75% of all plants is eucalyptus varieties. Okay, it's a kind of semi-arid conditions, kind of semi-arid type of climate here. And life forms, very important is it has some endemic life forms. Mammals, okay, more important are marsupials. Marsupials are the most, marsupials like kangaroo. Marsupials like kangaroo. It is marsupials. It basically means that these animals, they bring up their young in the initial stages in the pouch near in front of the stomach. So marsupials are a special category of life forms. And the discussion that I wanted you to mention was, of course, okay, that Australia is unique because of the fact that it does not have the type of conditions which others were had, the others had. So Australia was unique. Bats, rodents, okay, marsupials dominated. That was an important discussion we had. Marsupials dominated. So this table I will share with all of you on your portal. You can look this up and memorize this for that matter. Now, what I would want is that you also open up your textbook and some important sections that you may consider to look up. So in the old edition, it is page 167. In the new edition, 174, I'm looking at environment geography. So in this, some important discussions is that the world is to animals, also called as the faunal regions or zoo geographical regions. This says that these the biological processes basically implies the process of speciation, migration, dispersion, extinction. So all which is related to evolution. Okay, it's very important reason why we have the distinct type of distribution. And what impacts this is, of course, the physical environment. The physical environment impacts. Okay. There is a zonal pattern that we have. The zonal pattern. The animals have radiated, they are spread out in all directions. There is a role of migration also in the distribution. And the distribution pattern is not uniform, not continuous, okay, in most cases. So it talks about North America, Eurasia, and so on. This is an important page that you can look up in your textbook. This is page 169, the old edition, and 176 in the new edition. So it's the Palearctic region. Palearctic region, if you remember, is essentially Eurasia. It talks about the areas where we have this, Eurasia, Mediterranean, the rest. There's tundra region, coniferous forests, deciduous forests. Nearctic region, this is North America. And very clearly says that Nearctic regions consist of geographical territories of North America and Greenland. There is much similarity between Palearctic and Nearctic faunal regions. Both were connected through the Bering Land Bridge. We talked about the Bering Strait here. The Bering Land Bridge that enabled exchange. It enabled exchange of the two regions, mixture of animal species. Okay. Otherwise, it says that these regions, on the basis of similarities into one region, that's why we refer to these region as Holoarctic. Holoarctic is Nearctic plus Palearctic. Okay. It may be noted out, it's an important point. It may be noted that in the beginning, horses, pigs, goats, and sheep were not present in the Nearctic region. But later on, okay, it says later with the land bridge, okay, they have come across. So that's an important discussion here. If you look at the Australian region, this is the Australian region here. This is also called as Notogean. The term Notogean was used by Schmidt in his classification. And this is unique. It has marsupials. The pouch attached to the outer abdomen. So this is kangaroos. And what happened was, because it remained separated, so large carnivorous animals did not invade here. Okay. Because of isolation, large carnivorous animals did not invade. Okay, and this area has been able to retain its uniqueness. Some of the important points that we have covered here. So what I'll suggest is you can look this up. And you can develop an answer around this if you go through this a couple of times. Similarly, you also have an important summary, which is also about the plant distribution across the world. Now, in the plant distribution, you may choose to look up the textbook. So this is page number 149. This again is in the new edition, 149 in the new edition and 146 old edition. I'm looking at Environmental Geography by Savindra Singh. So it talks about the study of distributional patterns of terrestrial plants. The study of distributional patterns of terrestrial plants may be attempted in two ways. We can talk in terms of species, we can talk in terms of vegetation distribution. But remember one thing that I mentioned earlier, that in phyto regionalization, the focus is on shared evolutionary history. And more important, it's about endemic species found in a region, found in a realm. So this is the most important aspect of studying biogeographical regions. I'm talking about, of course, plants. And if you remember the concept, we have mentioned Engler's scheme, and we have mentioned Takhtajan's scheme. So Takhtajan's scheme is what we're mentioning right now. And in Takhtajan's scheme, what becomes unique is it more or less remains the Wallace regions. It remains the Wallace regions. But the difference is that they have added a couple of more regions according to the uniqueness of fauna. So you have to draw the Wallace regions, these animals. For plants, what you must do is you must separate out one region here, separate out one region here, and add Antarctica. So in the plants regionalization, what you must do is add Cape Province. This is the Cape Province. You also add Patagonia, Chile, Andes region, and you add Antarctica. To the regular scheme of plants, if you add these three, you get the plants kingdom, the plants or the floristic kingdoms of the world. And if you talk about what are the uniqueness of the life forms here, so this is what I'm discussing here. The uniqueness, you could start with Australian region if you want to start off. So it's the Australian region. It says this is an area of eucalyptus. I mentioned that 75% of all Australian plants. It is now dispersed because of man. It's a deliberate role of man here. If you look at the regions of Cape, now Cape region is a very interesting region. It's a very, very small part. This is the Cape region here, part of southern Africa. And this region has bulbs and tubers, which are called as cryptophytes. Cryptophytes. These have bulbs and tubers. Look up your page 147 in your old edition. And if you're looking into your new edition, it is page number 150. This is page 150 in the new edition. So cryptophytes is unique to the Cape province. And these cryptophytes, very importantly, were brought by European settlers. They're brought by European settlers. So somewhere it says so. It says here that the dispersal of these garden plants possible when South Africa was colonized by Europeans, who distributed these garden flowering plants from South Africa to gardens of other parts. So an important role here is the role of man in dispersing the life forms. Otherwise, the original If you look at the original type of life forms, the original was temperate, evergreen, and the modified ones, which were probably the inferior ecosystems because of man's impact, it has become sclerophyllous shrubs. So originally, the Cape province had temperate evergreen forests. These were modified, converted into scrublands, and they also were modified and they brought in bulbs and tubers. So Cape province could be a short note if you want to write down. And next one, of course, is the Antarctic region. Antarctic region is a cold area, so the main type of vegetation is nothofagus, and we have got tussock grasses. So we have some grasses here. So in Antarctica, the main vegetation is some grasses, otherwise largely permafrost and tundra. And the variety it says is a variety called as nothofagus. Nothofagus, and a variety called as tussock grasses. I think as a short note, these are the possible regions you have to get ready with. Why? Because they have a bit of uniqueness in terms of their variety and in terms of their origin. So if you know this much, and of course, please do not forget to look up the summary. The summary sheet I will share with all of you eventually. Okay, so this could be an important one to memorize and by heart. Okay, the details of flora and fauna. So if you remember some of the names, and if you made notes while I was teaching, this should be enough for you. Thank you.